A gift for your pastor. A gift for your pastor. Hello, everyone. My name is Persohn. You can contact me at pastor@mascot.church or in the comments below if you like. Now, I don't need this gift. I already have what I'm going to talk to you about. But hey, this might be something that you might want to do. I came across or was pointed out to a book that I just had to have recently, and I found it. And I want to talk to you about this book and the implications of it, and why I think your minister might be interested. Now, you see, your minister might be somebody who says that prophecy is yet to be fulfilled, that the book of Revelation was written after the fall of Jerusalem, and it's talking about some kind of future event that we have yet to see, or something like that. And you may be hoping that he will catch the understanding that the book of Revelation was more than likely written before the fall of Jerusalem, as well as the rest of the New Testament scriptures. And this changes the tilt of almost everything most of our ministers and most Bible scholars have learned over the years. In fact, it's really quite profound. Now, without further ado, let me just hold the book up here, and then I'll flick the slide to it so you know. Now, you can get this anywhere. This is written by a traditional Christian, and it's very worthwhile. The book is called Rethinking the Dates of the New Testament. Now, there was an earlier book called Rethinking the book, The Dates of the New Testament, something like that, by John A.T. Robinson. I've talked a lot about that, written many years ago. This author draws on some of Robinson's work, but he goes a lot farther. So let me put the image from Amazon of this book on the screen for you here. We'll come back here. I'll do this and then this. The book is written by Jonathan Bernier, possibly. This is what it says in the Amazon page. This paradigm-shifting study is the first book-length investigation into the compositional dates of the New Testament to be published in over 40 years. It argues that, with the notable exception of the undisputed Pauline epistles, most New Testament texts were composed 20 to 30 years earlier than is typically supposed by contemporary biblical authors. What emerges is a revised view of how quickly early Christians produced what became the seminal texts for their new movement. Now, the author quotes many good scholarly sources. I haven't finished reading this yet, but I thought I'd talk about it now because it's kind of flows off the back of my last 2 weeks' messages, which were done in the church, and struggled a bit with the tech, but here we go. Now, let's just lay a bit of foundation first of all. As we've said in the last couple of weeks, the prophets in the Bible are not in a particularly good order. They start in our Bibles, most Christian Bibles, with the book of Isaiah, and they end with Malachi. We have the big ones, the big names, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel, and we kind of think the others are sort of also rans. But that is not the case at all. They might be called minor prophets because their books are smaller, but they're not minor in their message at all. Now, all of these prophets together represent several different epochs, ages in the Old Testament period. It's very, very critical. Isaiah and his contemporaries, including Hosea, were placed in history at the time before the captivity of the northern kingdom to Assyria. This is very critical. They had Assyria to look forward to and to prophesy about. They had the Babylonian captivity that came afterwards. They had the return to the land to prophesy about. They had the birth of John the Baptist, the birth of Jesus Christ, the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, and the fall of Jerusalem. All of those things that they were looking forward to. The second group of prophets, including Jeremiah and some of those in that period, we talked about that last week, did not look forward to the Assyrian captivity because it was past, but they did reference it. Ezekiel, who was a prophet of the exile, referenced the judgment that would come on the southern kingdom, Judah, that was so much like the judgment that came on the northern kingdom. So he looked back, but he wasn't looking forward to that time. And so that is interesting. And then you have the prophets that came afterwards, the three that we talked about last week, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. I'm sure my pronunciation is not very good. They were not looking forward to the Assyrian captivity. They were not looking forward to the Babylonian captivity. They were looking forward to yet another judgment to come, and that's also important. Now, hundreds of years before the fall of the Second Temple, under the rulership of King Nebuchadnezzar, the First Temple fell. And there are many references to that in the Old Testament. It really happens during the ministry of Jeremiah. And this is so interesting because you see what happens before the temple fell. You see the condition of the people before the sacking of Jerusalem. You see what happens during that time and after that time, and looking back. And the book of Lamentations is a book looking back on the fall of the temple at that time, hundreds of years before the second temple fell in AD 70. The first temple and the second temple fell on the same date, Tish B'Av, which is very interesting, but hundreds of years separated them. Now, the fall of the first temple was so significant. Many prophets pointed to this upcoming sacking of the city and the fall of Jerusalem, of the first temple. You see it in the Kings, you see it in Chronicles. Then there's other prophets referenced it and looking back. And you see this in the New Testament, that it's even referenced and looking back. The fall of the second temple was very, very important. However, when the second temple fell, the genealogies were not destroyed. That is, that Jewish men could trace Jewish families could trace their history back even to generations before. This helped with the settling of the land. This helped with inheritances and so on. And that was very important. With the destruction of the second temple in AD 70, the genealogies were lost. Today, it's not possible for any Jewish person to say what tribe they came from, because all of that was lost. It was all gone, all ended when the Lord brought the Romans, and that was the end of that period in AD 70, the end of what we call Old Covenant Israel. It was extremely important. It was extremely critical spiritually. It was very, very critical in so many ways. Yet mysteriously, not a single book in the New Testament looks back at it and says, oh, well, since the temple fell, this happened. And even though many people say that those books were written after the fall of Jerusalem, and I'm not going to go through dates. You can get Bernier's book to review that, to have a look. But many authors and many scholars today say, oh, well, all the books of the New Testament, or most of them, many of them, were written after the fall of Jerusalem. Looking back, it's amazing that those books, including John's magnificent book of Revelation, including some of the Gospels, don't even one time mention that the temple had fallen. This is such a critical juncture, such a critical point when the first temple fell. It was just so important in Old Testament chronology and Old Testament history. It was that hold your breath moment for Old Covenant Israel. What is going to happen? Then you have books in the Old Testament like Ezra and Nehemiah that are all about returning to the land and rebuilding what was taken, what was stolen, what was lost, what fell. There's no mention of that in any New Testament book. Now, why? Well, I would say the reason for that is quite simple. All of the books of the New Testament, every one of them, were written before the fall of the temple. Now, when you start looking at language that was used about the fall of the first temple, language used by Jeremiah, language used by Ezekiel, and even in Isaiah and some of the other prophets, you say, hey, look, this is very interesting language because the Lord Jesus Christ uses it looking forward. Malachi uses it looking forward. Zechariah uses it looking forward. I think even Haggai uses it. I just need to double check that, looking forward. None of these prophets, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi, were ever looking back at the destruction of another temple. They were looking forward at the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem in AD 70. And this is so amazing. It is just so gripping. Now, you see, your pastor, why would you want to do this and give this as a gift to your minister? Well, you could give him this video as well. And you could tell that this preacher is talking pretty fast because I'm excited about this topic, by the way. I believe that apart from the internal evidence of the scriptures themselves that strongly declare that all prophecy was fulfilled in the Old Covenant period, which extended until the fall of Jerusalem, which is my position, I believe that's the preterist position. I believe the most important piece of external evidence, or I guess you call it external evidence, that we need is the understanding that the books of the New Testament were written before this event, that none of them looked back on the event. I'm completely personally convinced of that. Now, there have been many, many great works that have talked about what I would call preterist eschatology. You can look at the many books written by my friend Don K. Preston, and there's a lifetime of reading in his books alone. And there's a lot of great commentary along those topics. Max King and different other ones have written fabulous stuff all about that. But the foundation of all of it, in my view, the thing that I had to see for sure, was that all of these books were written before this time. And once that penny dropped, I thought, right, now I get to understand what's happening. These books all talk about a coming future event. Yes, Revelation does talk about a coming future event, but it's not future to us. The Olivet Discourse, which you find in Matthew 24 and 25, particularly Matthew 24. You find it in Luke 21. You find it in Mark 13. You find a kind of a condensed version to another audience in Luke 17. Those are talking about an event just soon to come. And it's not about the end of time. It's not about the end of human creation. It's not about the end of the natural creation or the end of civilization as we know it, etc. No, it's about the end of the old covenant period. And that's really fascinating. So let me just hold this book up again, and I'm going to read some quotes off the back of it. You can get this anywhere. If you just use your search engine, Rethinking the Dates of the New Testament. I got it from my local Christian bookstore, so it's stocked locally. And so this is written by Jonathan Bernier. Well, who is Jonathan Bernier? He's a PhD from McMaster University in my home stomping ground in Southern Ontario. Is an assistant professor of New Testament and executive director of the Longren Research Institute at Regis College, University of Toronto. So again, back to my stomping ground. So let's just grab a couple of quotes off the back of the book that I think you'll find interesting. And this is Jonathan Ryan, Wheaton College, a must-read for anyone interested in historical approaches to the New Testament or early Christianity. Then from James McGraw, Butler University in Indianapolis, this book promises to shake up the scholarly study of the New Testament and some extra-canonical Christian works. What Bernier has provided will undoubtedly serve as an impetus to refreshing scholarly conversations for decades to come. I absolutely agree with that. Now, Bernier admits that he's not the guy who invented this whole understanding, that he's standing on the shoulders of giants, and he does a lot of great work here. So what would Al do if Al was in a church where the minister was struggling with Al's particular end time view? What would I do? I'd get in this book and I'd say, hey, look, this is really worth a read. Now, I've heard people say that, my minister doesn't really think the Old Testament prophecies about this time or Jesus' prophecies about this time or in this time period are critical at all. Well, I think that's dead wrong. And I think it leads to some fundamental failures to understand the flow of God's eschatology all the way through Scripture. So there you go. My name is Al Persohn. You can contact me at, did I say that? Pastor at mascot.church, or the comments below. You know what I'm talking about. It's a great pleasure to be back to you. We've got some new projects, or back with you. We've got some new projects coming in the next little while, which I'll talk about. And we're going to continue along our studies of the little apocalypse and so on as we scorch into 2024. God bless you. Come back again soon for more. This book is a great gift for your pastor.